Hello, my name is Brad Bodnerchuk, and welcome to the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast, where we discuss everything hospitality, from the food on the plate to the teams that make it all happen, and the community that drives this industry forward. On this podcast, we sit down and chat with some of the most exciting, inspiring, and creative minds that make up one of the most dynamic industries that there is. And today, we have the pleasure of sitting down with none other than Team Studio Roslyn. In the house tonight, we have the Kate Snyder, the Emma Grant, and the Jessica McDonald. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks, Brad.
This is awesome. This is super fun. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this, as I know you're very busy, not only in your personal lives, but professional as well. So thank you so much for carving out some time for this.
Happy to do it.
Awesome. So fill in the blanks a bit for the listeners and the viewers. Kind of what is Studio Roslyn, how it came to be, and how did you guys get to where you are today?
Well, I'll start. Jess, jump in anytime.
Go ahead.
Jessica and I met studying architecture in Winnipeg 11 years ago now, back when we were babes. I mean, still babes.
Right.
Babes.
Right. Yeah.
And we formed like a really strong friendship there, and similar love for design and life and everything, I think. And then a group of us, like our best friends, kind of moved out west when we graduated. And I jumped right into the architecture world and just started studying industrial design, following that path. And then very shortly, Jess got offered a position and sort of like brought me on board to do retail design for an in-house studio. Yeah, so we started working together over...
At Oakenfort.
Yeah, how many years ago was that?
6 years ago?
Yeah. And we've been working together ever since. So we were there for a bit and then kind of jumped ship to start with a startup interior design studio, and helped grow that studio from ground up, which is really exciting. And I think how we both like got to develop ideas and who we are as designers. And
Right.
Emma Grant, she started working with us like a year into that. A year? Hey, Emma? Yeah. And so it's kind of like all of us like grew together, which is really exciting. And then we're there for like 4 years, and then it was time to start our own thing, which happens, you hit a ceiling, whatever.
Right.
And then we started Studio Roslyn, which is something that Jess and I talked about like 11 years ago when we first met.
Amazing.
This like high concept level. Yeah.
And then brought Emma over recently.
Just poaching all the talent in the city.
Yeah. I mean, like
all our friends thought we're weird that we're like, all our jobs we've done together, and they're like,
that's great.
No one hires like that. And we're like, well, they do. Like if you just ask.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's all about your perspective. Like working with best friends is tricky, but I think there's way more pros that come with it than cons. And the work like is amazing from that, because I think it's just like your minds can meld in a different way than if it was just purely colleagues.
Yeah, I think there'd probably be a lot more alignment that way. If you guys you kind of have a bit of an idea of where the person comes from as far as their inspiration or what they like to see and do. So I would imagine, as risky as it can be, forming partnerships with friends, there are, like you said, there probably are a lot more pros if you like dig deep into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you get to know someone's like mind and the way they think about creative projects, and you can kind of like guess what they're gonna do or say. Like, it makes it easier.
You're able to like, I mean, I think like some of the best design comes from when you filter it through different minds, not just like someone designing from a white tower or whatever. And that's furthered, I think, when there's like friendships involved with similar interests, similar people.
Right.
Yeah.
So my exposure to you guys is strictly as far as firsthand experience. Obviously, knowing you outside of Studio Roslyn before you got into this, but comes from my exposure with restaurants and that industry, and seeing some of the work that you guys have done there has been inspiring for me, and part of the reasons why I've aligned with you guys and working together, knock on wood, in the future on a project. But what is it about that industry that you either find yourselves being successful in that space or being inspired to dip your toe into that water? As opposed to retail, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, as opposed to retail. Because I was just going to say, like, commercial interiors specifically.
Okay.
We like to work on because you can actually, like, go and use those spaces after, which is really cool.
Right.
And, like...
Okay, so let's unpack that then. Let's look at then, and this is an education for me as well. When you're talking about interior design, there's obviously, I'm going to say, and fill in the blanks for me here, layman, but is it residential interior design and commercial interior design, or are there other facets as well?
Yeah, there's...
Yeah, some people get like more specific where they're like healthcare or whatever, but yeah.
So let's call what you guys are doing.
Those are kind of the two.
Right. So we're calling what you guys are doing commercial, and of that makes up retail stores that Joe Blow would go into and buy a T-shirt, and then there's also hospitality restaurants as well. So, of the commercial work that you guys have done, do you find? Then I guess a different question is: do you find there's a different process when it comes to restaurants and bars than there would be if it was, say, a clothing brand or a cosmetic company?
Yeah, I think what's unique about restaurants is there's so much strategy that's involved, which is similar to whenever there's a business involved. Like there should always be strategy behind it. But with a restaurant, you're trying to put together this like perfect formula of bringing together a whole bunch of different types of people into a space where you're serving food and entertaining and truly being, you know, a host, I guess. And the way that you approach this space is really like, how are people using that space for a moment in time? Like it's not someone's house, it's not whatever.
Right.
And how do you tell the restaurant's story?
Right.
And how do you do that through design? So it's like we unpack what the menu is and why, and people's inspiration and what like drives them to even open a restaurant or open a second, third, whatever. And then like our job is to translate that into a physical space, which is really exciting. And I guess that's maybe answering your question, like why we love restaurant design or like approach to it. Lots of strategy, getting to know.
They're kind of the most, the projects that are like the most narrative driven.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you can go, I mean, every project is different, but you can really get into.
Is it because, and again, I'm assuming here, but is it because restaurants are a little more emotional? Meaning, sure, the clothing brand is probably someone's baby and vision, but it gets to a point where it's bigger than that person. Whereas I find with restaurants, and again, this is my interpretation, I find with restaurants and looking at the work that you guys have done, it's not these big box stores, right? It's these like one-offs. People are super passionate about what they do, and they've been wanting to do it for a really long time. And like you said, there is a story to it that you guys can draw from. So do you feel like there is a little bit more emotion when you sit down with the customer or a client, part of me, that is looking to execute
They're like
a restaurant space?
extremely personal to people.
Right.
And then, like you said, the work that's out there in retail, like the smaller scale projects that we probably would be really interested in, a lot of the time people will just kind of do it themselves because it's a little easier to try to execute that on your own with like an industrial designer and whatever. But yeah, restaurants are just like so personal to people, and yeah, they get like quite so invested, like money wise, but time wise and everying that it's
it's interesting. I think it's a very different experience than going and buying, and I'll keep coming back to the clothing just because it's something I'm familiar with myself. Going and buying a shirt, it's an experience, right? You walk in and the lighting and where things are placed and how things are displayed, that all is very important, but it's very different than when you go out to dine. It's just a completely different experience.
They're not occupying that space for the next 2 hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think you're like really immersed in a restaurant, even if it is the fast, quick service, fast casual. You still are there to get something different than truly just a disposable product, which is more, and with dining out, I mean, so many people dine out for different reasons, but that's also kind of what's unique about it, is it's different than just going to shop or any other kind of commercial space. People are like celebrating, they're just there for the experience truly, and not even just for the product.
Right.
I don't know. It's kind of cool, a cool bringing together of things.
Yeah, like I say in the intro, I truly do think that it is one of the most dynamic industries that there is. And I think it also lends itself to that dynamic feel, because it's a requirement for all of us. We all need to eat, right? Biologically. But then there's that sense of community as well that I think so many of us long for and biologically need as well. Like we need community and we need food. So that's why I think it can be such a dynamic experience, and especially when it's done right, it can be so impactful. So speaking of done right, Emma's been sitting very quiet in the back there. I wanted to get an idea of one inspiration for you guys. Like, where do you go for inspiration when you are working with a client, say on a restaurant? But before you get into the inspiration piece, who is doing something right now, whether it is a restaurant, whether it is just a space, any kind of business, what do you look at and think that's really cool, or they're kind of pushing the envelope, or I respect what they're doing? I'm putting you on the spot here. I apologize.
Oh, yeah. This is for me. I think there's a lot that's happening in sort of like experience. So I think a lot of retail is going that way as well as restaurants, but even just creating social spaces for people. So something that comes to mind that's quite inspirational, I think, is something like The Wing, where it's a women-driven space for entrepreneurs, just space for women to sort of create and be in. And again, it's creating an experience. It's a beautiful space. It's just very comfortable. And that same community-driven is sort of what's behind it.
Right.
So that, I mean, that's something that's...
that sticks out.
Sticks out for me, yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
like you're saying, like a lot of businesses are like retail and restaurants are like moving more immersive almost. So
How do you mean? Sorry.
so like Keys of Tanto, if you go in there, it's like you feel like you're transported back in time to like a jazz cafe in Japan in the 60s, you know? And like the music plays into that, and the design and the food, the little like wayfinding elements throughout that kind of tell this like story. So yeah, it's a full escape from your life to go somewhere like that.
So where would be something, or what is something you look at right now, Jess, where you feel like they're really hitting it out of the park? Would it be something like the Kiss of Tanto?
Yeah. We worked on that project, and Mosquito as well. That was like Kate was designing that, and that was like your main driving thing, was like creating this like environment that was an escape.
Totally. There's a muse behind it, like a personality, a character. Right. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you guys, it's so interesting listening to you guys talk about what you do, but also watch you guys process like your words and how you describe it, because it is such a creative thing. And it's amazing for me just listening to Jess, you talk about the touch points in the space, whereas a user, I don't even really, I'm not fully aware of that. And I think I know restaurants, do you know what I mean? But you're mentioning things that I don't necessarily pick up on. I think that's kind of the idea, is it not?
Yeah, I think like our opinion of really successful places, which is seen in how successful a business or a restaurant can be, is you almost can't sit here and call out everything. It's more like the accumulation of
holistic,
like everything, whether it's like the menu design, what people are wearing, how you're greeted, the tableware, what's on the tables, and then all the details. So it as like a whole package, you know, like you saying, like I can understand that it's like really well thought out, versus, you know, walking into a space and being like, that light is cool. And that's kind of like what you see in the space, and that's it, or that's as far as like the experience goes.
And what about you for inspiration or motivation? Who's doing something right now where you sit and watch, like they're killing it?
Oh, I mean, Jess and Emma will giggle at me. I like love fashion and everything fashion. That's like a passion of mine, and all of us do. Like it's kind of creative fields like music, film, art, fashion. Fashion specifically, though, I like how like fast paced it is and season based, which is kind of fun to like pick up on and pull out of. But I like so many brands are lifestyle based now. I don't really like that word, but it's fun to see like some fashion designers' interpretation of what that means. Right. Whether it's like ridiculous or hilarious or comical or.
Can you do some shout outs? Like who's in the fashion that you think is just crushing it?
I love Jeremy Scott. And like this is like high-end fashion.
Shout out Jeremy Scott if you're watching.
If you're listening,
what
bro.
Up, Jer?
If you're listening, bro, get at me.
Yeah, get at her.
I'm
Send
wearing
some
your
free stuff.
skirt right now.
There you go.
I actually
what up,
am.
Jer? So
having a sense of humor with stuff, I love and appreciate that, especially in the creative world. Maybe that's what's really inspiring me.
Yeah,
is how people present themselves, and like even in our presentations and meetings, like I'm like, it's awesome to just be real, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, whether that's, having a sense of humor or stuff, or I don't know.
I think when I hear the word creative, I definitely don't think like rigid, black and white, stay in your lane. I think like grab whatever color you want, grab whatever medium you want, and just do what you want to do. So do you guys find that on your projects you are given that leeway to just be creative, or do you have to kind of stay in your lane, or are you able to kind of influence people and help them see something maybe they don't see within their own projects?
Yeah, I think we, like from day one with Studio Roslyn, people know that we're like into using crazy colors and like patterns and things like that. And we just kind of like set that as a precedence early on. So people come to us to do like really different stuff like that. Yeah, as opposed to just like your typical Pacific Northwest cafe you'd see or something.
Right.
I think it's kind of like how we approach design. Like it's not totally just surface and materialistic based, you know, like that's a whole concept, strategy, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, every project is so different. So sometimes like, you know, we're working on a really large office project right now, which is interesting and a first for us, but love it because there's actually like hospitality notions in there, whether it's a fitness center, like I don't know, not total restaurant, but that has like a really clear end user, and so we're not going to be using neon colors everywhere or like look to, you know, 1970s Italian modernism, which we love for inspiration or stuff like that. But I actually love it because it's a challenge to be creative within that box. And I think that's like, not to be like, we're doing this really well.
Totally. Play that trumpet.
But I think that's like what all of us do really well, is like we're able to take like a set of guidelines from a client, or even if it's like, this is what I like, this is what I don't, this is what my business needs, this is purely functional stuff, and then create something really creative within that.
Yeah. I think it's almost like, as you were speaking, I was thinking about kind of those mystery boxes you see on all those cooking shows nowadays. And if it's pasta and a protein, or it's whatever it is, there's so many different things you can do with those items.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
if I gave you a loaf of bread, peanut butter and jam, you might not come back to me with a peanut butter and jam sandwich. Do you know what I mean? But with those tools, you created something that was just, it was more you, it was more unique, and it was more Studio Roslyn, I guess.
Yeah, totally. There's a cafe that we're working on in Victoria, actually, which is where our first project is, Super Baba, which is super quirky.
Legit. Shout out Super Baba.
Hi, Super Baba, guys.
Yeah. Go check them out, Super Baba. We'll give them a shout out in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. But we're like, you know, a few blocks away from them. We're working on another cafe, which will have zero color. And the idea behind that is like a really warm, community-based, keep it all existing client space. And I'm really excited like what we've been able to do with that, because we've kept materials. There's no color anywhere.
God,
which
that's
is like,
interesting.
Yeah, but I'm just as in love with where it's ending up as Super Baba.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I think like that's setting out really clear project goals and basing it off of an experience and a narrative and personality.
That was a cool project because they have
you know?
an existing cafe space right now.
Right.
And like their customers are people who come every single day. So they didn't want to like alienate them with the new space at all. So our starting point, like the jumping off point, was like, okay, what is giving it this like warm, it has like the current space has a really warm, like inviting feeling, and it's just kind of like honestly wood everywhere, and like bright big windows and things like that. So trying to like come up with a new interpretation of that works in the new building. And keeping the same programming, which again isn't about materials and a lot about how they operate, and they come from really like high level hospitality backgrounds, and then I've opened this like
cool
neighborhood cafe.
Are we able to share who it is or no?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Okay. Stay tuned. Well, this will drop like the first week of June, so maybe by then we can give them a shout out on social media. We don't need to do it
they'll
now.
be
It's
pretty
fine.
close to opening.
Yeah,
by then.
probably.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool.
They're like just being so sensitive to their customers that they're like,
That's great.
you know, wanting to.
I respect that.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. But anyway, yeah.
That's definitely a challenge, or I would assume be a challenge when someone comes to you. And did they say no color, or that was just kind of the impetus of what kind of came about in regards to not wanting to shock their current client base? And
Not wanting to shock the current client, but one of the owners' aesthetic is definitely
Yeah.
minimal Japanese,
Something-
no ornamentation.
Something else that all of us really like to do is we really like to get to know our clients.
Right.
I think that's a really fun part of our job, and you
For
should
sure.
take the time to like enjoy each other because things get crazy in restaurant design and construction and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But we got to spend a full entire day with them. Like we went to their house, we
Oh,
sat
wow.
and talked with them. They fed us food. They like really, it was important for them to come, for us to come and like really see and meet everyone. And I think honestly through that experience, we just set everything up on the right foot of just knowing who they were.
That's cool.
Yeah.
now, would
mhm.
that have been all of you? Like, sorry, we're just missing Alex, right?
Yeah,
Alex is
Mercer.
the
Yo, Alex. Shout out.
Shout out, Alex Mercer. Skipped out before we started recording.
Yeah.
I don't
He's
blame
like, I'm
you.
out of
I don't
here.
blame you. So Alex makes up the other 25% of Studio Roslyn, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So on this project in Victoria, is it everyone is on it, or are you guys kind of like soldiers and you're just manning what you need to man, or is everything a collective?
That was when we worked on that project when it was just Kate and I.
Okay, cool. So if it was a new
yeah.
project coming up, would it be all hands on deck, or it depends on the project?
I think probably depends on the project.
Yeah.
But mostly, like we're only as good as our whole team, and I
Right.
like strongly believe that. Same thing as I was saying before, that the best ideas come through
Mhm.
being filtered through different minds. But I think as much as possible, we would want everyone off the beginning to understand the clients like just as much as Jess and I do, whoever it is in the office. That's important because if they're leading an aspect of a project or, you know, tasked with coming up, whatever, they should know what the goal is behind the project just as much as we should.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Have a collective.
Mm-hmm.
I want to unpack something we talked about just a few minutes ago in regards to Jessica was so eloquently talking about just touch points in a space, in a restaurant space in particular. So give the listeners an idea, and feel free everyone to chime in on this, but give listeners an idea of what you guys look for when you're stepping into a space, and do your expectations change depending on what that space is? But where do your eyes go? What are you looking for? And again, does your expectations, pardon me, change whether it's a cafe in Victoria or a white tablecloth restaurant in downtown Vancouver?
I think even before walking into the physical space, like you're talking about if there's a new project, like you
No,
and I
sorry,
are
no,
going
sorry.
to look
I'm
at-
talking about you just being a user.
Oh, just going to spaces.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Being a designer, it's like you can't see
I
space. the
either
same.
want to go to like a hole in the wall with really good food,
Right.
where I don't actually think much about the design, or I really like if it looks like the owner just kind of did it themselves and
Okay.
like you can tell that their personality's in there, or I want to go to the space that's like really thought out, like well executed design.
So Jessica's
And
like,
I don't go to anything in the middle.
right. So you're
Yeah.
just over here. You're
Yeah.
way left or you're way right.
Yeah.
Emma, where are you at?
I would say that I'm really compelled by spaces that take into consideration those little details. So even if it's not like a high budget, but there's been some thought into, the branding or the napkins or the space itself. It not necessarily that it's really expensive, but just that there's that thought and there's that care and attention, and you can tell that, the owner is invested and care about what the experience is for the customer. So that's sort of.
How does that change your experience? So if you walk in there and you sit down and the napkins are absolute rubbish, how does that change your experience?
Yeah.
No, but really,
that's
like,
it.
are you just like, okay, this is in your head? Obviously, you're just like this. They missed the point on this one.
I think for me, it's just sort of maybe lacks a little bit of a luster. Like I think it might just be a little bit more of a boring space for me. Or I would consider, would I come back here?
Right.
Like, what was my experience? Did it impact my experience?
Right.
If it didn't, then it doesn't matter. But if it was like a big thing that sort of stuck out where I'm like, oh, that wasn't thought about, or that's a bit lazy, then it impacts your time in the space. Yeah.
If lighting's awful.
Oh man, lighting, lighting.
Yeah.
What about you, Kate? What are you looking for when you step in as a user?
I try to think about what kind of space I'm going into first, not to over analyze this. I'm not like sitting there for an hour being like, okay,
You're in
go
your
into
car.
McDonald's.
Do you go to McDonald's?
I'll have a McDonald's chicken nugget every once in a while. Okay, that's not what I want to talk about. but to that point, it's like if you're going there, then your expectations should be X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if there's a new restaurant, for instance, and their whole face of the brand and press and everything that they've been trying to push out is the next best thing in X, Y, or Z, and then they don't execute on that, I'm put off, whether that's reflected in like prices in a restaurant or
the service.
Yeah. But yeah, like Jess was saying, if it's a amazing ma and pa hole in the wall, I probably like appreciate it just as much because I know, they're not claiming to be the newest modern Chinese restaurant or
but
whatever.
They're just killing it.
Yeah.
So
So it's kind of like expectations of what I think someone has presented to the public, and
what they've actually executed.
yeah.
So can we shout out anyone else in town that you guys think is kind of hitting all those touch points? Can we give them a little bit of plug? Like we mentioned Queso Tanto, which obviously you guys worked on before. Any projects you guys haven't worked on that you are big fans of?
None. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I always really like going to Bestie. Just because it kind of is just true to what it is.
Right.
Like, you just go there for, like, a simple, like, sausage and fries, and it doesn't disappoint.
Yeah.
And do you feel like the space emulates that?
Yeah. Scott and Scott worked on that, and I thought they did a really good job.
Well done, Scott. Good job. So back to Kate, you mentioned fashion being a big inspiration for yours. How does that lend itself to the creative process for you? Do you find you're pushing boundaries? I don't mean you personally, but you guys as a team, are you guys pushing boundaries as fashion does? Really? I mean, there's some pretty far out there fashion. I'm not familiar with Jeremy Scott, but some fashion that I see on the TV or in magazines, I just think like, wow, who wears that, or when do they wear that? So do you feel like because of influences like that for you and for the company, leads you down a path of pushing the envelope a bit more as a company?
Definitely. I think so. Like when Jess and I were starting to think about what Studio Roslyn could be, summer 2016, even just like writing down words of what we wanted our brand to be, our personality. A lot of it was like fashion forward thinking people and translating that into like interior design. So we're hoping that people can look at us and be like, that crew has their finger on the pulse of like what's happening, and they are like pushing status quo, especially in Vancouver. Like if we want to talk about the city we're in too, I think there's like a ton of opportunity to push what spaces can be and how they can be translated by a design group, so I think we definitely are. Yeah.
Do you feel like you guys are offering something different than a lot of other studios, locally or nationally or internationally, or?
Yeah, like I think it's cool to always follow fashion trends, music trends, everything, because like food trends almost keep pace with
for sure
fashion trends, and they're all like connected. When you start to like look at like why are people now wanting to buy this kind of thing, it's like what's driving that decision is like driving their food choices too. And so if you can just like keep your finger on the pulse of kind of like everything that's happening in design, then you start to see how it all comes together.
I do a lot of reading from companies that are not designers and speak to trends, and more trends in generations and consumer trends, which like Jess was just saying is everything all around us, everything we do.
Right.
That's important, and what people are wanting and why, and
How do you guys feel about the statement? And I think it was Einstein, so correct me if I'm completely misguiding this quote, but there's no such thing as an original idea. Do you guys believe that? Do you not believe that?
I would say that's fairly accurate. I think the thing that changes is people's perception and perspective. But I think it's all sort of iterations, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
Yeah, it's,
you know,
someone's like new interpretation of something.
Yeah, exactly. You know it's working, or you know this is the beginning of an idea, and you're going to explore it further. So yeah, I'd say I think we work that way as well, especially sort of pulling some inspiration from the past, which we do a lot too, which is a huge inspiration. So yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else want to chime in on that quote?
Yeah, just like, because there's great ideas that happen in design and food and everything how many years ago, and there's no reason to just like constantly throw those out for whatever's the most contemporary thing, right? So I think that is good when you're like looking to historical reference. And yeah,
Is there ego attached to this process, the creative process? So if I hired a studio to create something for me, and then I decided that it looked like something else that I've seen before, obviously there's a lot of work that you guys put into it and a lot of emotions as well, but is there ego attached to projects as well? I don't necessarily mean ego in like a negative stigma way, but is there ego involved in these projects, whether it be a clothing store or a restaurant or a commercial space?
Yeah, I think I talk about this so much with my husband, James. Shout out to James.
Shout out husband James, all the support.
No, but actually though, because I'll come home frustrated with whether it was a consultant or client or something, and talk about ego, and then we'll sit down and James is like, well, you have a healthy dose of ego, and he'll always say it that way, that ego I think has such a negative connotation with it, but it's more like confidence is important in what you're presenting to someone, and confidence in your ideas.
Right.
And then when ego starts to take over, and the like overall project goal and vision and everyone's ideas coming to the table, when that's taken over by someone's personal ego, I think is when things go sour.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. Like we'll always, at the beginning of a project, we started doing this like a year ago, is we'll have like clear project goals that we identify, and like design goals
Or design principles.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and then we always will kind of just like talk to the client first, come up with these like main driving things, and then refer things back to it all the time, so that it like doesn't just become about one person's opinion on something. It's like about the project.
That makes a lot of sense. And one thing, as you guys were talking, I was thinking about bringing it back to, say, like a kitchen. And I find that so many businesses, restaurants in particular, work in silos. So the first person that figured out that, hey, if I sous vide this steak, I'm going to get the perfect cook on it, they almost didn't want to share that with their neighboring restaurant, because it was their idea, and it's what made their steak better than their neighbor's steak. Do you find in the design game that everyone's kind of working in their own silo and not wanting to share? And why is that?
Yeah, man, all of us have talked about this so much, especially just with our own personal experiences in the design community in the last, 8-9 years of all working here. Why is that? I think like where it comes from, why people kind of keep ideas to themselves, or it's always about competition and not healthy competition.
Right.
Is like a designer is very personally invested in what they're presenting, because you're putting your own interpretation of something out there to someone, and they're gonna love it, hate it, or somewhere in between.
Right.
Which that's can feel like a personal attack on you. So that's one part, I think. And then, I don't know. The competition aspect, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's like this in any industry, same as chefs, same as whatever. And that's certainly, we're like trying to be the anti of that, I think. Like sharing ideas is.
there's like a good amount of people now in the design world in Vancouver that are like trying to be the opposite of that. Like, yeah, sharing our knowledge with each other.
How is that
and things
facilitated?
Like that. Like some of our friends have a studio in Vancouver as well, Studio CM. And we all will just like chat design and running that kind of business and how it is, and just try to be like very open book about it. So
Yeah, I just feel like if there's a restaurant and all of a sudden they find a killer egg producer and the eggs are like amazing, the yolks are like the best yolks, I feel like it's for the betterment of the whole industry to be like, hey neighbor, I just found out these awesome chickens lay these awesome eggs. Why don't you go buy your eggs from these guys? So is there the opportunity for that with what you guys do, whether it's working with different suppliers on products or paints or those things? And is there a channel right now besides just like getting together on a Wednesday night some week in a month? Is there a channel that you guys either are currently involved in or could kind of create to be the change in the industry a bit?
I don't know about channels. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
If you know of any, let us know. I would just add sort of along that same path is that like, I think that the city itself could, it would be a great service to the city if more designers sort of opened up, because I think the city can be pushed further, and if one designer is doing it or has figured it out, to sort of share that knowledge and push the city a little bit further would be great.
Yeah, the bar can be raised so much in Vancouver, and when you have like designers sharing their knowledge and like continuing to like push things in their projects, it's better for everyone, because then the entire community gets around that
100%.
And there's just more work in the industry. Yeah,
there's definitely, I think, groups doing versions of that, whether it's like the Aviary is like a collective group of designers and artists and stuff, and I think it's like they share a library, and so no specific channels, but I was really floored and overwhelmed and very humbled by like the support Jessica and I got when we started Studio Roslyn. And I would say specifically with professional women in the industry in the same, way.
Totally.
Yeah, that of just reaching out and being like, these are some struggles we've had. This is how we've overcome. Here's how I've handled this.
Right.
And then even down to, I have lots of friends. Like I have a friend who's a lighting designer who reaches out quite often about, do you have like this type of metal worker that you've worked with that's really great? And like, I know all of us are like always willing to share all of that, because I agree. It just like it raises the bar like across the board, which is great for everyone.
we do that with people. We'll like shoot them a question, and like we had like Ken the other day, like here their YVR asking us about a mill worker or metal worker, and
Right.
we just like always swap contacts. And
I think it's what's it called? The law of reciprocity.
Right.
Where it's like the more you give, the more you get. But you're not giving because you want to get, but that's just how the world works, right?
yeah,
The more information, the more stuff you share, the more you give back. I heard someone say the other day that he looks at life like it's a favor bank. And he sees a lot of people making withdrawals a lot of times from favor banks and not enough deposits. So like, do someone a favor, let them know like who your mill worker is or who your lighting guy is. I think that only strengthens the industry.
Definitely.
you honestly immediately see how that like then comes back to you.
Yeah.
Like it really is just like, if you help people out, they'll help you out.
Make a deposit in that favor bank, people.
Right.
So we'll start to wrap it up here, but before we do, I ask 2 questions in every podcast, and I haven't prompted you guys, so I apologize. I'm gonna totally put you on the spot here, but 3 of you, so you guys can do teamwork here. So the podcast is called Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast. So I'm gonna ask you, what is your half a dozen haven't yets? So something you haven't yet done, whether it's in design, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's a trip you haven't taken, whether it's a meal you haven't had, whether it's a bottle of wine you haven't tried. So there's 3 of you. That means we'll have to come up with 2 each. So what are 2 of your haven't yets?
Who wants to start? Let me think about this first.
Yeah, I have to think.
Yeah,
for a second.
go on that. Okay.
I will.
Oh.
I have not yet been to Rome, and it's
Look out,
driving
Rome.
me crazy. I
Emma's
need
coming
to
in
go.
hot.
I'm going to Rome. I'll be there in a week and a half.
Okay, so there's 2. We've got 2 down out of 6.
Yeah, another travel one. Haven't yet gone to Iceland.
Oh,
I'd
okay.
love to go there. Yeah, that's where my grandma's family's from, and
Oh, cool.
always been intrigued.
Cool.
I haven't yet worked on a full hotel project, which
Ooh,
I think
nice.
all of us would love to. That's sort of like encapsulates everything:
Yeah,
hospitality,
100%.
restaurants, cafes.
Yeah,
You know, like that
the
would
whole
be a
experience.
dream. Anyone out there
Yeah, look out
looking
to
for some?
reach out to the girls and Alex, let them know. So that's 4 of 6. We need 2 more.
Haven't yet had a baby, but I'm going to be having
Yes.
one soon.
For those of you that are listening to this in your cars as you drive around and haven't looked at this on YouTube, Jessica is 7 weeks,
months.
7 months pregnant.
33 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so she's got a baby coming just before Lindsay and I are having ours. So shout out to the baby to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
excited for like living your life a little less selfishly, or like just for yourself.
Oh hell yeah,
Because right now it's just everything I do is for me. Like,
Yeah.
honestly,
yeah,
otherwise, other than like your friends and family, like
Yeah.
doing things for them. But I think it'll just be like, yeah, life turned over.
yeah. Total paradigm shift. That was a great haven't yet. One more haven't yet from one of the ladies on the left.
Haven't yet purchased my own home. I think I'm maybe the only one here.
That's all right.
Which is tricky in this city, but
Get
Yeah.
that hotel project, and you'll be buying a home
Yeah,
in
exactly.
no time. Those were awesome. And the second one is half a dozen have-tos. So you guys have done some traveling. You've worked different jobs. You've seen different things. You've eaten different food. What are 6 or what are half a dozen have-tos? So to our listeners, you have to try this. You have to try this dish, or you have to go to Super Baba, or you have to travel to Rome, or you have to get pregnant. What are your half a dozen have-tos to the listeners?
Jess and I both have spent an okay amount of time in South America. Jess's husband is Peruvian. Yeah, so speaking for like the foodie and design lovers, like have to. Chile for me was just amazing.
Cool.
All of it. I don't know. Some
Yeah, in
areas
Peru,
and-
have to have ceviche in Peru.
Have to have sushi.
And like drink like they call it like tigre leche,
Tigre leche?
tiger milk.
Okay.
And that's like just like the juice from your ceviche, but people
Right.
just drink it there.
Oh, okay.
Like at the end of a meal.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah.
Emma, you getting involved in the have-tos?
oh god.
Something you've done that you think everyone else needs to get involved in? Have to get a sick tattoo?
Oh yeah. Yeah, get a sick tattoo. That's a great one.
Yeah, you guys are all inked up. I love it.
yeah. Yeah. Find a great illustrator and get them to put their artwork on your body. That's a good idea.
There you go. That's
I
3.
have one. I think it's important to, at least once in your life, if not as many times as you can, just throw up your arms and say, fuck it, I'm doing this.
Yes.
And I think some of the best stuff comes from that.
Yes.
You know, like I love motorcycles. I ride a motorcycle, and
Badass.
just being like, I've had so many ladies come up and be like, how do you even get into that? And it's like, yeah, it's a little frightening, but that's like a moment where you can be like, fuck it, I'm doing it. I'm learning
Right.
this thing, or I'm traveling to this place. I'm going to start a business, which is also frightening. I'm
Yeah.
going to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
Also frightening.
Yeah.
That's a big have to,
I love it.
at least once in your life. Yeah.
Okay. That's 4.
I think everyone has to go to the Amazon.
Okay. Wow.
And like
That
on
was
the
out of left
Peru,
field a bit.
the Peru
What about
thought train.
What about the Amazon?
Or just like, yeah, just because it's so full of life
Right.
there. It's insane. Like
Right.
if you go, when was I there? It would have been fall, but in the Amazon, that's like the rainy season. And like every like dog has like a little litter following it, or there's just like little monkeys like everywhere, and it's just kind of like teeming with life.
Right.
Yeah.
One more. Wrap it up.
Oh man. Travel alone. I think everybody should travel alone.
Cool. I like that.
Spend some time by yourself in a city you don't know, in a language you don't understand. Spend some time with yourself.
I like that. Get lonely, people. I like it. No, that's great. In a world we're always so connected, it's very healthy, I think, to get in that space and get uncomfortable as well. A lot of growth comes from from challenges and uncomfort. So thank you guys so much for this. I really appreciate it. Emma, thank you so much for joining us. It was dope to add another voice from Studio Roslyn. So before we finally sign off, where can people find you? How can they connect? Where can they see what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera? Let people know.
On the open road. Just kidding.
I like that.
On the open web.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. Studio Roslyn, Instagram at Studio Roslyn, Facebook at Studio Roslyn, our website, which is we're launching a new website really soon.
Oh,
hopefully
look out for
within
that.
the next week, which will
Sweet.
have a bunch of new updated projects, that kind of thing. Yep, www.studioroslyn.com.
Check
How
them
do you
out.
spell Roslyn?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, Roslyn is spelled Roslyn.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time. Thank you guys for watching, listening, and tuning in and supporting the podcast. Until next time, we'll see you then. Be good and do good.